very excited to be joined by 2/4, one half of the CLOAK. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is I have Andrew Broder and Martin Dosh, both of whom are running very exciting residencies this month, and in Martin's case, through into February. Andrew's residency is at the Turf Club, and Martin's is Ice House, and it's on various different days, if I understand correctly.
It's like a Thursday, 2 Tuesdays, Friday and a Monday and a Thursday.
Yeah.
But all the dates are, listed.
Yeah. You were referring in the post that you just made reference to just now, to Casino Royale.
Yeah.
Now, and Eric.
Yeah, so I asked John Kesson if he could do it and play Rhodes.
Yep.
And then he said yes right away, and so just on a whim, I asked Eric Fratsky if he could do it.
Yep.
And he, as far as I know, he hasn't done any bass and like improv hip hop stuff in a long time, but that was one of the bands that I saw when I first moved back here, like in the 90s.
Yeah.
Kind of was like, oh, this is pretty cool stuff.
And the context for that, so you'd been at college studying drums?
Studying English at that point.
Oh, English, okay.
I'd come home a few times a year and just saw them play a few shows, and I don't know, it just sort of seemed like there's a pretty cool scene happening in Minneapolis, and it sort of somewhat inspired me to move back here.
Yeah. Having moved back, you've found yourself, or you were in the touring band for Fog before too long, and playing in Late Duster, which is... So what is the relationship, or what was the relationship between Fog and Late Duster? The question for the two of you.
Late Duster happened first.
Okay.
Well, you were working on your record.
Yeah. I was playing turntables and guitar and a little bit of other stuff in Late Duster, kind of as I was developing what would become my first solo record.
Yep. The eponymous Fog record.
Yep. And so before that, I was DJing around town a lot, playing at hip hop shows and stuff, and the scene that Marty's referring to, that groups like Casino Royale were a part of, was kind of important for me as well, in terms of a large group of people from a lot of different bands and genres kind of getting together a lot in those times, and kind of just trying things out, and Late Duster kind of came out of that, where there was a pretty fertile little scene happening with people, jazz musicians and funk musicians and guitar players, bass players, drummers, horn players, whomever, that were really open-minded and were willing to, kind of throw down with DJs and rappers, and and vice versa,
and be unafraid to fail,
and be unafraid to fail, and be right, and it was just adventurous, right? It wasn't always great, but it was always pretty brave on everybody's part, just to kind of throw themselves into it, and so and sometimes it was really great, and so there was a scene that kind of happened at this place called the Front, for a while. Where a lot of those shows happened, and then at the Dinky Towner was another place where a lot of those shows went down. I remember sometimes things would happen in the Clown Lounge, and things would happen in the Entry, and various other spots. But
what were some of the things that? So was Casino Royale and a band? Or
they were the backing band for a rap group called Full Circle, and that was where some of the Rhyme Sayers guys early on were present at a lot of those. So, Slug would come down and rap, or Ideal would come down and rap, or Los Nativos would come down, just different guys. And Musab or whomever. And so it was, this is like late 90s Minneapolis scene, and it was, I think we all kind of grew up in that and learned a lot from that. So Late Duster kind of formed out of that, and originally it was a 6-piece.
Stage one.
Stage one was in it, another DJ, and then another drummer besides Marty named Damon.
Yeah.
And then it kind of got whittled down to a 4-piece with me, myself and Marty and James Everest and Brian Olsen.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think that spirit, and probably goes for Marty too in the case of the shows that he puts together. I mean, I think any shows that we do, we're always trying to keep it, you know, lively and have some unexpected things happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, reach out to different people that are doing different interesting things. So I think more so than anything, yeah, both our residencies that we're doing now continue in that same spirit.
Yep.
Even though, you know, obviously the names have turned over and it's like, you know, constantly like refreshing itself and, you know, bringing new people into the fold and whatever. But it's a similar mentality that kind of started when we started making music together, and carries on in that tradition, which is cool.
And that's your ethos is very much reflected in the evolution and the shifts of Fog, for example. In the bio for Fog, it highlights that the band is tough to trace, leaving a trail of acclaimed albums, each considerably different than the last, on notable electronic labels, before disappearing and then re-emerging. So something that I'd really like to dig into a bit is, so 2010 seemed to be an important kind of pivotal year. That was a year, at some point in that year, there was a MySpace announcement from Fox in which you said, Andrew, that the band as it had existed was finished. That was also the year that the CLOAK came to be. And now, last year, 2016, there was a wonderful Fog record, For Good, which is not Fog as it had existed, but very much Fog still. So, what is the relationship between Fog and the CLOAK? What's your perspective now in 2017 as to how Fog as it exists now relates to Fog up to 2010?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I took a long break away from focusing on Fog, which at this point now I kind of just consider to be mostly a solo project, which is how it started.
Yeah.
Soon after I started it and made those records, I put, you know, the band of people together that influenced it and you know, propelled it forward, both in a live context and in a way of defining those records a little bit. But I think in making this last one, I maybe realized that the real truth of that music is in there's a solitude to it.
Yeah. And
that needed to be reflected in both the sound of that new record and in the performance sense, kind of bringing it back to, like, you know, this is like what's inside my head, you know, like how to translate what's inside my head, turn it outside. CLOAK is still my songs, but written kind of specifically with these fellas in mind to play them.
Those three.
And also, I really enjoy playing with all these guys, so I figured, like, in order to sort of compartmentalize things, I just needed to consider, like, Fog as my solo thing, CLOAK is a band, and it was easier to think about it that way for me. It just makes both processes more relaxed.
Okay. I think about it a lot too in terms of like an extension of the early Fog band. Because when we learned all of Andy's tunes, we had to like sort of translate them because there was no work, you know, trying to play those tunes off the first record. We had to sort of figure out a new way to do it.
Right.
So I think some of that same energy that we had in the early days, like, you know, 2001 or 2000, sort of comes through in parts of the songs. You know, like just, I don't know. The four of us have a very nice chemistry together. So it was,
we sort of accidentally.
The four of you in the original Fog band?
Same guys, yeah.
Which is the same guy. So
so that should be
Jeremy,
clarified. That
Jeremy and Mark.
And the two.
Jeremy Ildesaka and Mark Erickson and Marty were the original Fog live band.
Yep.
That live band shifted, different people came in and out over time, but that was the original inception of it. And for CLOAK, yeah, I just kind of wanted to, I was just like, I want to play with these guys, like it just feels really natural.
So there's a collective community component playing with these three people who are your great friends and also obviously great musicians to the CLOAK. Despite the shifts, the changing sound of fog, has you referred to like a solitary component? Is that the component or one of the components that makes fog, that through the different albums, through different manifestations, even perhaps when it is kind of proto CLOAK?
I think so. I think in retrospect, when I listen back to all that stuff, to me it definitely has a solitary feel, or it sort of marches to an individual one internal rhythm. Most of it, I think,
marches to its own drum. You were talking about trying to adapt some of the songs that were written, of course, as solo songs, to that band back in the early days. Did you ever perform A Word of Advice live as a band?
Like the spoken word thing?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, and the spoken word is MF Doom. Yeah. And
how much you paying to do?
Not very much.
I just asked how much Andy paid him to do that. So probably a case of beer and
we did not have a large budget.
But so how did that come to? I have some more specific questions about that, and I think I really love that song. But it is. I mean, I grew up listening to MF Doom in England. How did you and MF Doom establish a connection, and how did that song come to be?
I interviewed him for a magazine.
Okay.
Like my friends and I made a zine.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and I did a lot of music writing for it.
Nice.
And so I interviewed him for that, and stayed in touch with him.
Yeah.
Following that, it was a good interview, and he was really forthcoming in it, and we just kind of, stay in touch via email.
Yeah.
And I was just a huge fan, obviously, and his music had a big impact on me, and so when it came time, a friend of mine just showed me that little piece of writing.
Yep.
And I was like, wow, that's really cool.
It is.
I should have somebody read it. Should I read it? Who should read it? Oh, shit. Doom to read it, And so, so I just emailed him and I was like, hey, man, will you read this thing?
Yeah.
And he was like, sure.
Nice.
It was really cool. It was super cool of him, and he did it and sent it to me. And so we didn't do it in person, face to face. But he just sent it to me. He was very gracious, and
oh, wow.
It was a neat thing for me. That was a big point of pride.
Well, yeah,
for sure.
Understandably, and I'm just so glad that series of cause and effect happened with the friend show. It's a quote. It's from William Saroyan's play. Am I pronouncing?
Yeah, I think you pronounce it Saroyan.
William Saroyan's play "Time of Your Life."
Yeah.
Hence, in the time of your life. So, in the words of William Saroyan, as spoken by MF Doom and as selected by your friend and you, in the time of your life, live so that in the good time there shall be no ugliness or death for yourself or for any life yours touch.
Seek goodness everywhere, and when it is found, bring it out of the hiding place and let it be free and unashamed. Place in matter and in flesh the least of the values, for these are the things that hold death and must pass away. Discover in all things that which shines and is beyond corruption. Encourage virtue in whatever heart it may have driven into secrecy and sorrow by the shame and terror of this world. Ignore the obvious, for it is unworthy of the clear eye and the kindly heart. Be the inferior to no man, nor of any man be the superior. Remember that every man is a variation of yourself. No man's guilt is yours, nor is any man's innocence a thing apart. despise evil and ungodliness, but not men of ungodliness or evil. These understand. Have no shame in being kindly and gentle, but if the time comes in the time of your life to kill, kill and have no regret. In the time of your life, live so that in that wondrous time you shall not add to the misery and sorrow of the world, but shall smile to the infinite delight and mystery of it.
I mean, the whole of that spoken word piece, the whole of that monologue, I suppose, from the play, I've been thinking about that a lot when I've been paying attention to your residency and what you're doing with your residency.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so your residency has a name, and your residency is called Andrew Broder and People, a residency for music and action. So what do you see a connection then between that segment from the play, which spoke to you at the time and obviously means a lot to you, and what you're doing with your residency? Could you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I had not made that connection of that text as it applies to this, but it does make sense. And right, I think there is a thing to that of living in the moment, so to speak, and sort of acting, taking direct action, and just there's a straightforwardness to that thought. And so I think that for the last couple months, everybody's conversation with friends and people around us, in large part, everybody's kind of like kind of dumbfounded and feeling like, well, what do we do? What am I supposed to do now? And what does this change for me? And I think it's been a period of self-examination for a lot of people.
So did the political context very much is informing what you do with this residency?
For sure. I mean,
it seems like it shows.
Yeah, and so part of that and part of those conversations I've been having with friends was like, okay, well, what do we do? What are we good at? And how can we sort of apply what it is that we do and we're good at to bettering not only the situation, but just kind of picking ourselves up out of that feeling of, like, we're fucked.
I know Alexei shared that he was very excited that the first show he was going to be involved in of the year was something with his close friends and for this cause. And that the cause for that particular night of the residency was the Federation for Somali Community.
Yeah, Confederation for Somali Community in Minnesota, who, they work within that community to help, literacy efforts and employment efforts and education efforts, and recent immigrants kind of help them get on their feet, and political representation, the whole thing. And so, the idea for what I wanted to do with this weekly at the Turf was each week is connected to a different organization that's locally based, that's working, towards some goals that I think we're all, are at the forefront of all of our minds right now. So whether it's our neighbors in the Somali community or climate change awareness, second week, the third week was Planned Parenthood. The fourth week is MNOC, MNOC, Neighborhoods Organizing for Change, who work for all different social justice, economic justice in the city. And I don't have any illusions about any of these turning around the momentum of necessarily what is happening in the world right now, but I wanted to keep it locally focused, friend focused, community focused, and just feel a sense of solidarity in the city and among my fellow musicians and artists and cool people, and just have it be a thing that reminds us and reminds ourselves, like, not everybody sucks, let's pull together. We don't know what's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen, but let's remind ourselves of our, humanity.
Yeah.
And that what we do is very valuable and important. And I think the other thing too is that it's sometimes when shit is really heavy politically and socially, as it feels like it is right now, I think it's easy for people in the arts to sort of feel like their shit is trivial a little bit.
Yep.
Or just like, what does this matter? What does me playing these shows and making these albums and writing these dumb songs and whatever? What does this matter? In the grand scheme of all the incredibly weighty stuff that's happening. But I'm working hard within myself to flip that mentality around and say, I am a creative person. I'm a creator, versus a destroyer in this world. And so is everybody around me, and that's incredibly crucial.
Nothing bad ever happens by putting something good out in the world.
Right.
That's like the only thing that I'm good at.
Yeah.
Maybe not the only thing Andy's good at, 'cause he can paint too. But
Well, it's definitely something that you're both excellent at, and
two, it's just like it goes back to two. It's just like, how do I use my skill set? What's my skill set? Okay, how can I apply my skill set to do something and help some people? And so if the residency helps, if it convinces a handful of people to go volunteer once a week, or donate a little money, or do this or do that, it's kind of like the better than nothing type of mentality.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, something to do in the winter and get everybody out of the house and.
Something else that I was reminded of, I think it's in the song Hot Hands, the CLOAK song Hot Hands. There's one line: there is going to come a real moment in this life, so in this life again, when we will have to choose how we die. And that's a very serious line, of course. But then there's going to come a real moment in this life when we have to give ourselves a break to survive. And I was thinking of those two lines, seeing you in action at the first night of the residency, so seeing you in action at the residency for music and action, and the way in which, at times when you and the representative of the Federation for Somali Community of Minnesota were on stage, there you were very conscious of making a significant social and political choice, and it was very graceful and very important. But then also, while within a few breaths of that, you were saying it's like, cheers, come to the residency. It will be, come on future weeks. All of the minor characters from it will be like that too. So it's kind of tiptoeing this line that, like between those two lines of the song, where there's a very serious choice, but then at the same time there's a recognition that we need to give ourselves a break and recognize what value there is, despite how tempting and appropriate despair might seem.
Sure. Well, I would like nothing more than to not be very serious. I'm not I'm not a super. I don't know. I'm not like a super serious person. I don't think. Sometimes I am, but not really. I mean, I like to. But it does feel like the times are demanding everybody to shift a little bit.
Yeah.
And but yeah, if you're doing benefit shows and stuff like that, I'm conscious that that kind of thing can be a little bit of a, I don't want to say a downer, but like, it is good to maintain a sense of humor and a sense of joy. Maybe more importantly, just a sense of joy in what you're doing, and I think by being joyful and unserious and creative and fun, and telling jokes and maintaining that part of yourself in a way at this point too could be considered something of a defiant act.
It's revolutionary.
you know, or a borderline revolutionary act, because it's like, you know, the powers that I think we're all feeling like we have to struggle against at this stage want you to be terrified and want you to be in a defensive position and want you to be, you know,
and want you to give up on your art and
give
your
up,
community.
or just be paralyzed, you know, just be paralyzed, and therefore, you know, kind of like feckless, you know. So I'm trying to be determined and resolute not to, you know, and I fail all the time. There's some, you know, I'm like terrified every day, you know, but like, what are you gonna do, you know?
But observing this, it was, it seemed so right to me. It was reassuring to see the same person who was responsible for, you know, the song that we've been focusing on, with, for example, the line, I know you didn't write the line, but discover in all things that which shines, and similarly seek goodness everywhere, and when it is found, bring it out of its hiding place and let it be free and unashamed. So this letting of things be free is coming through in the experimental music, but it's also coming through in the selecting the right charities to bring onto the stage with you.
Yeah, no doubt. Right. Yeah, I think just the human thing is important, even down to the name of the residency.
Yeah.
People, which was inspired by this festival that I got to be a part of this fall in Berlin, called Michelberger Music, and it was like a week-long kind of, I don't know what to call it, like a happening.
Yeah.
With a whole bunch of musicians from all over the world getting together and just hanging out and making new music for the week and doing a very unpredictable festival at the end of it. And at that, they had this part of some of the shows they had were in this huge warehouse, and they had artist Eric Carlson do this enormous banner that's a people, gigantic Helvetica font, you know, just like huge, hanging over this big warehouse. And I like that idea and just the simplicity of it, and I think it's just, it's crucial right now. It's crucial to remember that, like, people are cool. Like, you know, your friends are great, your family's, you know, whatever. Like, whatever lens you want to view that through, just recognizing everybody's common humanity, as corny as that sometimes sounds, you know, is pretty important these days. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So one final quotation from a word of advice, because you're talking about common humanity. Be the inferior of no man, or of any man be superior. I think the way in which you're talking about the word people and the idea of just recognizing our peoplehood, that we are a community of people, very much fits with that. We've been talking about value, and you were saying that there's a sense in which you don't want to think of yourself, or you don't think of yourself as first and foremost serious, but there is some, I think, serious consideration of what is to be valued, of what is valuable, and going from the name of the residency to the name of the first CLOAK record, it's called Prison. There is a track called Prison about, and the lyric in the track Prison is about having just been let out of prison, but the spelling of the record is with an E. Yeah, and is this intentional? That's a Dutch word meaning to value, to judge the value of.
Oh, I didn't know.
Were you aware of that?
No.
So was it just a different, like, phonetically one could spell prison in that way?
I think for me it was more of a play on the word risen.
Oh, really? Right.
And also I think that I think, and don't read too much into that, but I think that misspelling can be used as sort of an effective artistic tool sometimes. Yep. I think it, on a subconscious level, misspelling sometimes tells you something about it's like a character trait, or the way a character or a writer or if you find a crumpled up note on the sidewalk somewhere and things are misspelled, or you see a misspelled sign somewhere in the world, there's a story. There's always like some kind of untold story behind things that are misspelled in a way.
Yes.
Like somebody always spelled it that way, and it's like a thing that the block they can't get past in their mind, or like every misspelling sort of has a little bit of a backstory to it. So I'm I like that as a device.
Yeah. And that comes through on the first track too. There must be a story, told or untold, behind the title of the first track. Allah you Akbar.
That's actually a tribute to Brand Nubian, the hip hop group.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So because they had already
they have a song called Allah You Akbar with you.
Is that a song that the CLOAK still play? Is that a song?
Oh no,
not for you.
It's that song's all right. It's probably not my favorite.
I think it was probably one of the first ones that sort of coalesced around, though.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it was like remember like our first couple shows. That was probably my favorite one to play.
Yeah, it's fun. It was fun to play.
Why?
Kind of a basher.
Yeah.
It has a nice build up at the end. I mean, Prison's pretty great too. But yeah, I think that was my favorite one to play.
Yeah, it's a little too much of a grunge song for me. I think it's a little grungy.
Yeah, there's a lot more dynamics to the new Fog record, of course. And to the later CLOAK
as well. I think,
those got developed into a cooler place, I think.
But it's given that I was reading value into the term prison, especially via focusing on a word of advice and the focus on what to value in a word of advice. Allahu Akbar is an expression of value, isn't it? 1.6 billion followers of Islam say that in all kinds of contexts, including when celebrating the world. And so that again struck me as a really interesting song to kind of return to, even just in this conversation at the moment, given the political context, and given that I think that being aware of what's valuable is something that suffuses the music, and certainly suffuses how you each go about forming your residencies.
Always there for me. Bring me $1 for the wires and I'll bring you something close to being free. Crime is always there for you. Crime is always there for you. Bring me $1 for the wires and I'll bring you something close to being free. Crime is always there for you. Crime is always there.
So the lyric from Fog is from the song Corey, and it's crime is always there for you. Crime is always there for me. Crime is not always there, but it is both in Fog and in the CLOAK. So crime comes up in Shoot the Dog. In particular, don't try to treat me like a criminal in the song Josephine. And then there's a lot of would-be potentially criminal activity, it seems. Beat me with extension cords, and that's not the only beating that goes on in the song Josephine. Of course, there's bike chain.
Yeah.
Whipped her with a bike chain in every room, every waiting room, and the dog is going to get shot as well. If it's not me, then it's you. They're just going to shoot the dog. So what is the significance of what's going on with that Fog lyric to begin with? How is crime always there for you, or always there for me? And then what's the significance of not wanting to be treated like a criminal, but then also these recurring images of violent crimes potentially?
I mean, I think when I'm writing about violence, I think there's all different kinds of ways that can be taken, and even though I'm using some examples that are sort of these harsh, visceral images, I think they're open for the listener to take in a little more on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And I don't particularly like watching like violent movies, for example. I don't, or shows, but but certain when you talk about violence in language and really find something very effective, like that. It snaps you to attention, like when you're listening to a song, it's just kind of like, and by snapping you to attention, it wakes the listener up, hopefully somehow emotionally. And that can be a good feeling, that can be a bad feeling, that can be cathartic, or it can be, take them to something painful.
Is snapping up?
But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Is snapping us to attention a defining feature of the CLOAK? If the solitariness is a defining feature of folk?
I think more in a broad sense, I'm attracted to writing and to lyrics that grab you in the way that moments in a book do, or kind of like back to a play, like those killer lines. Which maybe maybe that's a function of being a lover of rap music too at the same time, sort of like the punchline effect, right? Where, just like line that really makes you kind of like grimace and like,
words are just so powerful. I was just thinking about violence, just the suicide, like that stuff is the most minimal thing you could possibly imagine. It's like it's like reading a horror novel.
Like the song Frankie.
That's a good example.
That's live in hell out of
terrifying.
Every time you hear it, it's like
or like Cormac McCarthy, or people. There are people who can use violence, or Coen Brothers, or whatever. There's all these examples of in art where violence is used as a device or a tool, but it's about so much more than shooting a guy or stabbing a guy or whatever. Just like mindless killing zombies and shit. Like there's, but anyway. So right. So violence as a tool of expression. I mean, there's also something maybe to just the freedom in that you can include those things in a song, you can include those things in your art, and use it as a way of acknowledging that there's that energy out there,
right,
in our minds and in the world, while hopefully at the same time acknowledging its destructive
the art
power.
becomes an outlet for it. It's interesting that you brought up the word freedom, because the lyric in Corey develops. So crime is always there for you, for me. A little bit later, I'll bring you something close to being free if you bring me $1 for the wires. So what is this thing that's close to being free? Does that relate to what we're talking about, or not? Because it evolves from the lyric about crime always being there.
Well, crime isn't always necessarily bad, though.
Okay. Oh yeah, true. Crime. What's criminal is determined by the law, and the law obviously is.
Yeah, or there's there's victimless crime. There's Robin Hood type crime. There's
smoking weed
crime in the wrong state. There's
sodomy.
It's sodomy crime. There's all kinds of weird stuff that's not crime but is crime. So crime can, I think, be, again, it's if you're talking about it in terms of writing or making reference to it, it's a device that can open up all kinds of thoughts. And I think, to me, crime is totally connected to and is like the relative of freedom, even though you associate crime with like being locked up and incarcerated. I think the moments of criminal acts or deviant acts or whatever, I mean, those are the times in a perpetrator's or a character's life where they're probably feeling freer than maybe, either they're feeling free or they're so desperate for freedom that they're willing to do XYZ thing, but like striving for freedom. So I think that there's like that connectivity there between crime and feeling free.
There's certainly connectivity between what you're saying now and the feeling of the song Prison, where we have basically a criminal celebrating their having been liberated from prison. Well, let's focus on For Good for a little bit of time. That is, I can understand what you're saying about it being solitary. I think, although it's solitary and more confessional, perhaps, than the CLOAK, it is still informed by a lot of the same values. Again, value. Trying is a song that you performed solo at the first night in the residency. Is the manner in which you performed Trying on that occasion? Well, can you describe what the setup was, and is that have you always performed that song in that way?
Well, the most recent incarnation that I figured out to do with performing Fog live that I think kind of represents the feel of these new songs is just me. I was forced to figure out how to do it myself because I did a tour opening up for Polisa in October in Europe, and really the only way logistically that tour could happen is if I did it solo. And so I was like, okay, I'll figure out how to do this and try to keep it interesting so it's not just me kind of singing over backing tracks, which, I mean, I'm okay with somebody just singing over backing tracks too. You know, they're a good singer, but I like to improvise with it. And
do you have turntables?
Yeah, turntables and a drum machine, keyboard, loop pedals and effects pedals and little samplers and this thing and that thing, and it's kind of like my bedroom turntable rig brought onto stage, basically. So it kind of got to be really comfortable. Obviously, if you do something on tour, you do it 25 nights in a row or whatever, then you just get really comfortable doing it like that. So, so going forward, I think doing those Fog songs like that feels really good.
Feels good to the audience too.
Cool.
It's good to me.
Yeah, I mean, sonically, it's pleasing, and I think it's a good representation of how those songs feel. And I'm also able to incorporate what I've been doing around here a lot in the last 5 years, 6 years, or however long I've been doing, like more improv-y, beat making, electronic stuff. Like I'm kind of collecting all this stuff that I've been sort of fucking around with in the last few years, and bringing it, funneling it all into a solo performance where I do my song. So it's cool.
I love how it works kind of two ways as well, insofar as when I was listening back to For Good today, I was picturing you performing in that context, especially for the song Sister Still, where there's almost, it sounds like there's kind of scratching over the lyric, Believe in Me. Were you trying there to kind of synthesize, to almost have the record preemptively sound more like the solo Andrew Broder?
No, no. When I made the For Good, I wasn't even thinking about playing it live at all.
Oh, were you not planning to play it live?
Not really.
Yeah, there was a record release.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I worked on the record for a couple of years, and didn't. I really didn't put any thought as to how I would do it live.
Yeah,
and then
it was a studio album.
Yeah, and you know, and then when it came time for the record to come out, you know, excited and you know, you want to share it, and so you know, but no, yeah, I no. When I was making it, I just wanted to make the coolest record I could. And, you know, you can always figure out how to do stuff live. Yeah, one way or the other.
Well, you made a very cool record.
Thanks.
Well, you're welcome. A favorite song of mine is the song For Good.
Okay.
And I want to know, is it like this For Good is the full lyric, isn't it? And I get a really clear sense of a figure kind of assessing and reassessing their context, and you know, by the end of this song, the van, I don't know whether this is something that actually happened, but you know, the van reverses, put the car in park, but it slipped out of gear and rolled backwards into the garage. I would say. So just one gets a sense of things not being right, and then things continue to not be right, and just to kind of get worse, add insult to injury. On top of things not being right, now this has happened, and that comes through sonically too, I think.
Yeah.
And then similarly, like in Kid Kuma, again, kind of sonically, when the bass kicks in, those bass licks are so different from like the initial verse, and then so what with either one of those songs, it's the bass licks are coming in alongside the coming home repetitive lyric. For either one of those songs, or for any other song really on the record, could you talk a bit about the relationship between the really unique way in which it sounds and what's going on emotionally, or the type of solitary reflection that's happening?
I mean, as far as the sonic component to it, you know, a lot of it has to do with the palette of, I mean, I think anybody that's like making a record, or a painter doing a painting, or a writer writing a book or a story or whatever, you know, you have a certain mood and a certain colors or a certain palette that you know you want to achieve before it's finished, you know, or even maybe before you even start it. And I think that there were certain tones and certain colors. I think it's been like this with most of the records I've made. I think I've kind of had it in my head, like, I want these kind of textures in it, and these kind of sounds. I don't want any blank. I don't want to use blank for this. I want to use the, you know, here's my tools, here's my palette. Okay, now I'm going to make the shit, you know? Yeah. And so sonically speaking, I think that's why, you know, that's why it sounds the way it does. It's a reflection of the music I was listening to at the time of writing and at the time of recording. That was influential to me.
What were you listening to?
Man, boy, a lot of electronic stuff, or electronic stuff with singing. Yeah. You know, like FKA Twigs I liked a lot, you know, and like, oh geez, what else? Shabazz Palaces.
I'm remembering Kid A being the favorite Radiohead record of yours from our previous interview. Sure. Kid A seemed to me like a potential
It's one of my favorite records of all time.
Oh yeah,
it's in there, of course. Yeah, it's got to be in there somewhere. Yeah, definitely,
consensus.
Sure. So but getting more into like dance music and electronic, even though a lot of songs are slow and quiet. So I was either listening to stuff that was really like, pulsy and electronic and dancey,
yep,
or really like nice kind of like hushed piano. Anthony and the Johnsons, like that kind of stuff, so like mixture of those things, I guess.
Yeah.
As the other part of the question was like as to how that ties in to the writing. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to be purposefully like evasive, but I think those things just have sort of a way of working themselves out internally. I know there's a reason why it sounds the way it sounds, and that those sounds kind of spiritually connect with the mood of the lyrics, but I can't explain to you the plan behind that.
You don't need to. You made the record. So, and if you're in touch with your emotions, then. But
I will say that there was something I think that I wanted to get back to in spirit of my first couple records, which I think were more experimental is not the correct word, but like playful in nature.
Kikuma, for example, is very playful.
Mm-hmm. Sonically playful.
Yeah. And we were talking about it being solitary, but I think it's really interesting in Father Popcorn, the last track on the record. We do get those other vocals coming in. There's a female vocal, and then I think is there a male vocal as well for the lyric Father Popcorn?
That's me.
That's you? Okay. But
the other vocalist is my friend Gabrielle Herbst.
Yeah. So is there a significance to this other voice? Is that the only moment in the record?
No, she sings on a few different songs. And there's significance to me for sure. I think that it's a good way to shift. It's just a good way to shift the mood. Her voice in particular. Opens it up. In a way, it's like it would be like in a play where there's a lighting shift on something.
That's a really interesting metaphor, because I noticed that one of the promo images, the one that's on Bandcamp, has you putting on a shirt and a tie in front of on a stage.
Yeah, that's from the video that we did for Trying.
Yeah. So I just find it interesting that you use that kind of theatrical metaphor. Is that are you thinking in those theatrical terms when you're composing the music, or is that just a way to describe it after the fact?
I mean, I like plays.
Yeah.
And I like that way of writing. So it's probably in there. I don't think about it too directly as I'm writing songs, but I mean, I do when I'm writing lyrics, I try to write them in a writerly way or whatever, whatever that means. Put some thought into it, like a writer who is thinking about writing a good piece of writing. Writes.
Absolutely.
Diner counter, piece of peach pie, cup of coffee, wet my fingers, brush his hair back from his forehead. What do you want? Here's my hustle through Grand Central Station to the next jump in the next town. Set 'em up and knock 'em all down. Sticks his tongue out, flops his earlobe. Nice to meet you. Presses his mouth to the window, blows his own cloud. Set 'em up and knock 'em all down. Lay my head back, rest my tired eyes. 20,000. What do you need? Set 'em up and tucks my shirt sleeve. Gives me his eyes. Give him my grind.
In the time of your life, live so that in that good time there shall be no ugliness or death for yourself, or for any life that your life touches. Seek goodness everywhere, and when it is found, bring it out of the hiding place and let it be free and unashamed. Place in matter and in flesh the least of the values, for these are the things that hold death and must pass away. Discover in all things that which shines and is beyond corruption. Encourage virtue in whatever heart it may have driven into secrecy and sorrow by the shame and terror of this world. Ignore the obvious, for it is unworthy of the clear eye and the kindly heart. Be the inferior to no man, nor of any man be the superior. Remember that every man is a variation of yourself. No man's guilt is yours, nor is any man's innocence a thing apart. Despise evil and ungodliness, but not men of ungodliness or evil. These understand. Have no shame in being kindly and gentle, but if the time comes in the time of your life to kill, kill and have no regret. In the time of your life, live so that in that wondrous time you shall not add to the misery and sorrow of the world, but shall smile to the infinite delight and mystery of it.